Hey guys, tonight we're heading into a world where winter doesn't just nip at your nose, it barges through your thatched roof, sits on your chest, and dares you to stay alive with a cabbage and 3 coals. This is medieval winter, and you're a peasant. No fireplace, no central heating, no Gore-Tex boots, just wool, wits, and whatever you can borrow from the neighbors, including their body heat. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you? Post it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The frost comes before you expect it. It always does. One night the thatch above your bed drips rain into the corner. And by morning, it's solid. Your breath hangs in the air like a ghost that hasn't decided whether to leave. You tug the wool blanket tighter over your head, knowing full well it's riddled with holes, but at least the holes are familiar. Your mattress, if you're feeling generous enough to call it that, is a sack stuffed with straw and hay so old it crackles like fire when you shift. Bits of last season's fleas still cling to it. Stubborn little bedfellows who've survived more winters than you. You curl tighter, knees to chest, and try not to think about the walk to the privy. It's across the yard, past the goat shed, where the wind turns corners like a tax collector. You could try and hold it, or you could risk frostbitten thighs for the joy of icy wooden planks. Either way, you lose. The hearth is cold. Of course it is. Nobody stayed up to tend it, wood's too precious. You ration it like gold dust, saved for when your fingers turn blue or someone starts coughing in a way that makes everyone else look at each other sideways. You wrap yourself in yesterday's tunic and last week's shawl, all layered like the world's most disappointing pastry. Peasant life is all about layers. The more holes, the more airflow, which technically means more oxygen, which probably means something good for survival. Right? Outside, frost paints the world with quiet cruelty. The fields lie sleeping under crusted snow, and your footprints from yesterday have vanished. Nature has no memory here, only repetition. Cold, wind, a little more cold, then sleet, then cold again. You shuffle to the hearth and gently poke the ashes with a stick, praying for a stubborn coal. You find one, just one, glowing faintly like the memory of warmth. You cradle it like a newborn guilt, feeding it dried twigs and pleading with it under your breath. It coughs into flame. Success. Sort of. You'll still have to warm your hands over it like a miser counting copper pennies. The fire's enough to heat your palms, but not your back. Your toes? Lost causes. You wiggle them inside your shoes, if you're lucky. They're leather. If you're not, they're just burlap sacks with ambition. Your first chore is water, which means ice. The bucket outside is frozen. Again, you bash it with a wooden ladle. Chip at it like a sculptor who's never had breakfast. Eventually, you get enough for tea, if you can call boiling grass and beet leaves tea. You sip it slowly, eyes fixed on the horizon. The sky is pale, streaked with the kind of gray that makes you feel like the day gave up before it began. You mutter something about chores. You always do. It tricks your body into movement. You gather firewood, counting each piece like it's a limb you're about to lose. Some peasants keep ledgers of logs. Not on paper, of course, just in their heads. You know who borrowed a stick. You remember. The chickens complain loudly this morning. Their co-op leaks. Everything leaks. You toss straw into their corner, ignoring their judgmental little eyes. They're warm. You're not. You're slightly jealous. Breakfast is a scrap of bread, hard as last month's promises. You soften it with steam. Chew like your teeth are arguing with your gums. It's not satisfying, but it's enough. Enough to start the day. Enough to make it through till the sun gives up at 4 in the afternoon. Midday means chores outside. Harvest is long past. Now it's just maintenance. You patch the fence. You scoop frozen dung with hands that stopped caring 3 fingers ago. The wind slices through your tunic like a well-aimed insult. You try not to shiver too hard, it wastes energy. Sometimes, you see smoke curling from the manor house. They're warm in there. Thick walls, real beds, fires that burn all night. Maybe a goose. You imagine the scent just to punish yourself. Some part of you believes imagining warmth makes you warmer. That part is probably wrong, but it's persistent. You return inside as the sky turns from gray to the color of old bruises. Evening arrives not with drama, but with tired resignation. The hearth accepts your second fire with more grace. You toss in a sliver of kindling. Listen to the soft crackle like it's a lullaby. The children press in close. You don't have enough room. You don't have enough anything. But you share it anyway. Because this is how peasants survive winter. Not with wealth, not with cleverness, but with stubborn routines. Patch the hole, boil the cabbage, stoke the coal, sleep early, and try again tomorrow. Historians still argue whether the average medieval winter was deadlier by frost or famine. Honestly, you don't care. You just care about getting through the night with all 10 fingers and someone still snoring beside you. You lie down again, pulling the blanket up over your nose. A mouse squeaks in the corner. Your breath fogs the air one more time. And tomorrow? It'll freeze again. You wake before the rooster. Not because you're ambitious, but because your shoulder has gone numb where it touched the wall during the night. The cold seeps through the stone like an unwelcome bedtime story. And the straw in your mattress has migrated entirely to the other side. You perform the traditional morning ritual, shuffling the straw back under you, cursing mildly under your breath, and trying not to disturb the sleeping pile of limbs beside you, family. Mostly, one of them kicks in their sleep. You don't ask who. Getting dressed is less a routine and more a negotiation with fate. You pull yesterday's tunic over your head, the one with the elbow hole and faint smell of boiled turnips. Then come the leggings, wool, if you're lucky. If not, rough linen and hope. You find your belt looped on a peg, frozen into a gentle arc like it's mocking your waistline. You loop it anyway. Your feet are already cold. You haven't even stood up yet. You stare at your boots. Once, long ago, they might have been respectable. Now they resemble the tax records of a minor baron, full of holes and best left unexamined. You stuff them with straw. Again, you tie them with twine. Again, you sigh. Again, layers. That's the trick. You reach for your outer cloak, a glorified curtain. Really, woven by your aunt, who never did figure out how to end a stitch properly. The hem dangles like an afterthought. But it's thick, and it smells faintly of smoked meat, which is oddly comforting. You wrap yourself in it and prepare for the day. The fire's dead, of course. You poke the ashes anyway. Nothing stirs, not even the ghost of a coal. You mutter something creative. The children are still asleep, tucked under one blanket, forming a chaotic little burrito of elbows and snores. You leave them. You envy them. They'll wake when it's warmer. Which, considering the season, might be next month. You step outside. The air bites. Not nibbles, bites. It slips down your neck, under your cloak, into your very soul, and sets up shop with a smug little grin. You immediately question all life choices. But the chickens need feeding. The pig is grumbling, and the sun is somewhere behind that endless gray, refusing to show its face like a disappointed nobleman. You trudge to the shed. The path is crusted over with last night's frost. Your footprints crunch softly, then vanish behind you, like you were never there. Inside the shed, the grain sack has torn again. You tie it shut with more twine. Always twine. You're 70% twine at this point. The chicken feed is cold. The scoop colder. The chickens, however, greet you with warm clucks and judgmental eyes. You scatter the feed and try not to envy their feathers. You've considered sewing a chicken into your cloak before. You probably still will. The pig snorts, nudges your shin. His breath steams like a little furnace. You pat his side. You envy his insulation. Then you shovel his pen. It's frozen solid, and your shovel clangs like it's offended. By the time you're done, your fingers feel like 10 wooden spoons. You return inside to the smell of something boiling. Not quite soup, not quite tea, more like optimism. Someone's managed to heat water. It's got a few floating leaves in it, maybe cabbage, maybe dandelion. You drink it anyway. It helps. You eat a crust of bread, softened by steam. It's the same bread you ate last night, and the night before that. You no longer taste it. It's a formality. Mid-morning means chores. Again, always chores. You patch the barn roof with more thatch, using a ladder made of 3 bad decisions and a promise. The wind nearly takes your hat. You don't chase it. Let the wind have its fun. Your neighbor walks by with a goat on a rope and a look that says, "Don't talk to me unless it's about firewood." You don't. Instead, you focus on the smoke rising from the manor house. Again, they're warm. Again, you fantasize about being a cat in their kitchen. No responsibilities. Unlimited hearth access. Occasional cream. You are not a cat. You are a peasant. And winter is only halfway done. You fix the gate next. It's been leaning since last autumn. You hammer a new peg in with a rock. Your fingers sting. You swear softly at the sky. The sky doesn't answer. Lunch is, generously, soup. Turnip. Mostly. Maybe a carrot if the garden's memory is kind. You dunk the same crust of bread into it. It disintegrates into something vaguely nutritious. You eat it anyway. Children wake. They complain. You hand them mittens made from leftover socks. They complain less. Afternoon fades quickly. You chop kindling while humming a song you don't remember learning. The axe is dull. You are duller. But the rhythm is steady. And the pile grows. You stack it like treasure. You stare at it like it might multiply on its own. It won't. Supper is boiled barley. You add herbs. It still tastes like wet sand. But it's hot. And that's all that matters. You eat. You listen to the wind whisper through the chinks in the wall. You plug one with a bit of cloth. You lie down again. Under the same blanket. The same straw. The same cold. But something about the rhythm helps. The repetition. The survival. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were truly miserable in winter or just numb to it. The answer is probably yes. But you? You made it through another day. Tomorrow, you'll do it again. Because that's what you do. The chickens are at it again. You can hear them even before your eyes open. Squawking like the world is ending. Though in fairness, the world always feels like it's ending when there's frost on the inside of the window shutters. You don't rush to get up. There's no fire. And your cloak has somehow slithered halfway across the floor in the night. Your legs protest. Your back protests louder. And your nose is the only thing with the courage to peek out from the blanket. You pull the cloak back over your shoulders. It's cold, obviously, but it's also heavy in that oddly reassuring way. Like wearing a promise someone made you and never quite fulfilled. The straw under your mattress has compressed again. You punch it into fluff. Half-heartedly. And swing your legs over the edge of the bed. Your feet hit the packed dirt floor with a crunch. Frost. Inside the house. Again. You try to summon the willpower to be surprised. But it doesn't come. Instead, you shuffle toward the hearth and begin the daily ritual. Poke ashes. Find the coal. Pretend to believe it will catch this time. You whisper encouragement to a few cinders. They glow a bit out of pity. Maybe. Or just long enough to toast your fingertips before sighing back into gray. You need fuel. The woodpile is outside. And so is your pride. You throw a shawl over your head. Tuck the ends under your belt like some kind of potato-themed superhero. And push open the creaky door. Outside, the world is exactly as you left it, coated in a shimmering layer of malice and ice. The woodpile, stacked with great optimism last October, is crusted over with snow. The logs are damp, reluctant, and frozen together like they're on strike. You hack at them with a splitting maul that might be older than your grandmother. Each thud echoes through the silent morning like the rhythm of inevitability. Eventually, you collect enough splinters and half logs to make something resembling a fire. You carry them in like treasure. A dragon hoarding warmth instead of gold. By the time the fire begins to purr, your fingertips are back to tingling instead of screaming. You squat low, one hand on the stone hearth, one on your mug of barley tea, thinner than broth, but still hot enough to convince your bones they matter. Your oldest child joins you. She's wrapped in a too small tunic and her hair's sticking up like she fought a haystack in her dreams. You press a crust of bread into her hand. She eats slowly, as if savoring every stale, chewy bite is a sacred act. Then it's chore time. You've been delaying it, but the chickens won't feed themselves, and if they do, they'll start with your root cellar. You grab a basket and head out. The chicken coop door is frozen shut. You kick it gently, then less gently, then offer it a bribe of stale oats. Eventually, it opens with a groan of wood and hinges. The chickens scatter like gossip in the marketplace. Their feed is mostly grain dust and wishful thinking. You sprinkle it around, watching them peck with the urgency of minor royalty. One of them tries to climb into the basket. You admire her spirit. Back inside, your partner is slicing onions for the stew. The tears aren't just from the onions. Winter cooking requires emotional resilience. You add wilted greens and one lonely parsnip. The pot groans in sympathy. Midday approaches, which means insulation. Not glamorous, Not interesting, but absolutely essential. You stuff rags into gaps in the doorframe. You repack straw between wall beams. You squint up at the thatch roof, sighing at the tiny snowflake that just fell through it directly onto your eyebrow. Some households cover their walls with tapestries, not for style, but for draft control. You, however, have an old woolen blanket dyed a suspicious brown. You hang it over the door like it's a castle banner. You name it, Defense Against the Chill. It does nothing, but it looks intentional. You patch a window next. A real window is too expensive. Of course, glass is for monasteries and barons. Yours is a wooden shutter, with a tiny opening covered in oiled parchment. It lets in light. It also lets in cold. You smear more grease on it to keep the wind out. You hope. In the corner, the baby sneezes. You count to 5. No one else sneezes. You relax. Sneezes are dangerous in winter. 1 sneeze is a warning. 2 is a prophecy. Lunch is served. A watery broth with floating bits of cabbage and root. Everyone sips like they're pretending it's stew. It's not, but it's hot. That's enough. The children help with afternoon chores, fetching water, carding wool, stirring the pot. You praise them like royalty. You give them titles, Sir Waterfetch and Dame Spin-a-Lot. They giggle. You don't tell them how hard next winter might be. You let them have today. Later, you bundle up and walk to the neighbor's. He has more firewood. You have thread and mended gloves. Barter is the village bloodstream. You make the trade. You carry the wood home like a dowry. The fire thanks you with a louder crackle. The children curl near it, reading a borrowed scrap of parchment, a hymn or recipe or list of saints. They don't care. It's words. Words are magic. You smile. Evening descends without ceremony. You mix dough for tomorrow's bread. Not because you're optimistic, but because muscle memory demands it. You knead by firelight, humming the tune your mother used to hum. You never learned the words. Maybe there weren't any. Dinner is thicker than lunch. You splurge 2 carrots. And a tiny nub of salt pork so old it qualifies as a relic. You slice it thin. You pretend not to see the children's eyes widen. You serve it anyway. After supper, you sit by the fire, mending socks. The rhythm of needle and thread is soothing. The wool itches your fingers. You hum again. The youngest child falls asleep with one mitten still halfway on. You leave it there. No sense waking them. The fire is low, but the blanket pile is high. Historians still argue whether peasant ingenuity or sheer stubbornness kept winter households running. Probably both. You snuff the lamp. The cold creeps back in. But tonight, you want a little warmth. There's a certain sound that medieval snow makes when it shifts on a thatched roof. It's not a proper whoosh, nor a full crack, but a sleepy groan, as if the sky itself is rolling over in bed. That's what wakes you this time. Not the chickens, not the pig, not even your bladder. Just snow, stretching. You lie there under your heavy cloak and 3 layers of blanket, 2 of which smell like onions and sheep. In that order, blinking up at the ceiling and watching for the telltale drip. The ceiling responds with passive aggression, a slow, damp bead forming on the reed thatch above your head. You slide slightly to the left. The good news: your fire still has some life in it. A few embers glow with the dull defiance of a middle child. You coax them into a small flame. It's the most hopeful thing you'll see before sunrise. Breakfast today is porridge. Oats, if you're lucky. Barley mash, more likely. It sticks to the bottom of the pot and your soul in equal measure. You stir it with a wooden spoon that's seen too many winters and lost its dignity as a utensil somewhere around the plague years. The children sniff the air. Hopeful, you serve them quietly, tucking 1 dried apple slice into the pot as a treat. A luxury, truly. Dried apple is rare this late in winter. You're saving the rest for emergencies. Like when someone cries over a broken mitten or when the neighbor's goat escapes again and tramples your bean rows. After breakfast, you layer up. It's roof check day. A good peasant checks the thatch every fortnight in winter. You're not a good peasant, but you do like not getting snowed on in your sleep. So up you go. You climb the ladder. It's more suggestion than structure. Tied together with rope, desperation, and the optimistic advice of a cousin who once saw a cathedral. The thatch is brittle, dusted with snow. You pat it down with a rake, stomping softly across the ridge like a clumsy bird. Your toes tingle. You pretend it's bravery. From up here, you see the village. Smoke trails curling from chimneys. Distant figures hunched against the wind. One lone child chasing a chicken with manic winter energy. You wave. The chicken doesn't wave back. You inspect the chimneys. The manners is clean. Yours looks like it's grown a mustache of soot and regret. You add scrub chimney to your mental list. Somewhere between mend fence and don't freeze. Back on solid ground, you gather rushes for the floor. They've worn thin again, and without them, the cold climbs up from the earth like gossip. You scatter fresh rushes with ceremony, muttering your version of a blessing. May they stay clean until the pig wanders in again. Then it's time to make candles. Yes, candles. Because no one wants to survive the frost only to stub their toe in the dark and curse themselves into purgatory. You pull out the tallow, a greasy, fragrant lump of hardened fat. You melt it carefully, watching the sheen form like suspicious pudding. Then you dip, and dip, and dip again. It's soothing, in a repetitive way. Dip, cool, dip, cool. You zone out a little, dreaming of things like fish stew and permanent socks. The children help, mostly by tangling the wicks and naming each candle like a pet. One is Sir Waxy Face. Another is Hot Drip. You don't correct them. It keeps them quiet. And honestly, you're a little proud. Midday arrives like a dull knock. You eat bread, stale, as always, and a knob of cheese that smells like an old argument. The flavor is intense, possibly aggressive. You love it. The children spit theirs out discreetly. Next chore, wall maintenance. Walls, you've noticed, are not eternal, especially when made from wattle and daub. You smear fresh mud and straw into a growing crack near the hearth, pressing it in like frosting on a grim cake. The warmth leaks less afterward. Or maybe it's your imagination. Either way, you call it a win. Then comes the visitor, old Tom, from down the lane. He smells like cider and conspiracy. And he always knocks twice. Even when the door's open, he brings gossip wrapped in a turnip. You trade him 2 eggs for news of the next town over. Someone's barn collapsed. Someone else is marrying a cousin. Someone else swears they saw a fireball in the sky. You listen politely. Fireballs are not your department. You give Tom half a mug of tea. He talks about foxes, then leaves. You're not sure if he was ever truly here, or just Winter's idea of a joke. Afternoon drags on. You sew patches onto mittens. You check the root cellar for rot. You shoo the pig from your cabbage barrel. Again, you don't yell. Too much yelling scares the geese. You sweep the rushes. Sigh. Then sweep again after a child tracks in slush. You consider banning shoes inside. Then remember no one owns more than 1 pair. Dinner is soup. You've accepted that most meals will be soup until spring. But tonight, you add a single slice of smoked meat. It flavors the broth, makes the children blink in disbelief. You call it feast night. They laugh. You let them. Afterward, you sing a little. Not well, but gently. The children huddle by the fire. You tell them a story. Something about a bear and a clever hedgehog. You don't remember the ending, so you make it up. They fall asleep before it's done. You envy their faith in you. You tuck them in, one by one, then curl up yourself. The wind hums against the door. Historians still argue whether peasant families shared warmth out of love or necessity. Probably both. Either way, tonight you sleep in a tangle of limbs, wool, and hope. Tomorrow will be just as cold. But you'll handle it. You always do. You wake to silence. Not peace, silence. Which is worse. Because in a medieval village, silence means one of 3 things. The snow is falling too thick for the birds to bother singing. The pig has finally escaped and the chickens are stunned into stillness, or something has collapsed. Your brain cycles through these options as you roll over and hear it, a soft creak, a muted drip, and the unmistakable whisper of thatch surrendering its structural integrity. You sit up slowly. The thatch above the hearth is sagging. Not catastrophically. Not yet, but it's bowed like a tired back. And there's a damp patch in the center that pulses gently with each breath of wind. You sigh into your hands. It's not even dawn. Still, the world does not wait for you to finish sighing. You pull your cloak around your shoulders, ignoring the wet edge near the hem where someone sat on it with damp trousers. You step over the children, still asleep in a pile that would confound any attempt at genealogy, and shuffle to the hearth. The fire is gone, not dead, gone. Even the coals are cold, which is something of an insult. You grumble and poke through the ashes for anything salvageable. One tiny ember glows. Purely out of pity, you whisper sweet nothings to it as you add kindling, dried rushes, and a sliver of wax from yesterday's candle. Miraculously, it flares. There is warmth. There is hope. There is also still a sagging roof. You eat the heel of yesterday's bread while staring at the ceiling like you can gild it into holding. It doesn't respond. After a bit, your partner stirs. They ask, through chattering teeth, if it snowed indoors again. You point. They nod. No one is surprised. Today is repair day. Again, because every day in winter is repair day. You just rotate what's broken. But first, soup. You heat a pot of broth, thin as gossip and just as likely to disappoint. Into it you add some dried lentils, half a turnip, and a suspicion of garlic. You stir it with your trusty wooden spoon and sip it straight from the pot. Breakfast of champions. Afterward, you gather your tools. The toolkit is humble, a bent knife, a hammer missing its handle, and several nails of uncertain origin. You mutter to the thatch that you're coming, and climb the ladder again. The wind greets you with a slap. The roof groans as you stand. Your boots slip once, then catch. You crawl on hands and knees across the ridge, using your body weight and some prayer to hold the sagging section in place while you weave in fresh thatch. It's crude work. Your fingers numb by the third knot. Your nose drips. You wipe it on your sleeve. A pigeon watches you from the chimney. You nod. He does not nod back. Typical. Below, your neighbor is yelling at his ox again. The ox appears unmoved. The repairs take most of the morning. You descend like a frost-bitten angel and declare the roof slightly less doomed. Your partner claps politely. The pig grunts in approval. Lunch is barley again. You soak the bread to soften it. You chew slowly. The taste is bland, but the heat is worth it. The children are quiet today, each wrapped in their own tiny woolen worlds. In the afternoon, you work on insulation. This time, you smear clay along the lower wall seams. Your partner follows behind, pressing in straw. The clay squelches between your fingers. You pretend it's cake batter. It helps. Then come the mice. Always the mice. Winter drives them indoors, and they build tiny empires in your walls. You set traps made of bent twigs and wishful thinking. You stuff peppermint leaves in the cracks. They hate the smell. So do you. Frankly. One brave mouse scampers across the table mid-task. You salute him for his audacity. He does not return the gesture. As the sun begins its slow descent behind the gray horizon, you check the food stores. Root cellar. Holding up. Barely. There's one wrinkled apple, a sack of oats, 3 suspicious onions, and a small wheel of cheese growing something more ambitious than mold. You cut around the fuzzy parts and rewrap it. You tell no one. Dinner is more soup, thicker now thanks to a pinch of flour. The children smile. You smile back. No one mentions the roof. After supper, the neighbors stop by. They bring a jug of something warm, alcoholic, and probably illegal. You trade them a bit of tallow and a pair of worn gloves. You sit by the fire together, swapping stories. Someone mentions the year the snow didn't stop until March. Everyone groans. Someone else tells a joke about a bishop, a goose, and a runaway cart. It makes no sense, but you all laugh anyway. The wind picks up. You all huddle closer. Historians still argue whether peasant communities were isolated or deeply intertwined. You know the truth lies in shared stews, borrowed firewood, and jokes that only work after dark. Later, the guests leave, bundled and red-faced. You bar the door, check the children, and bank the fire. Your partner hands you a mug of warm cider. You sip. You exhale. You let the cider warm your throat, your chest, your memory. Outside, the snow begins again. Inside, you curl up in your little kingdom of patched blankets and mismatched socks. The smell of wax and smoke and broth lingering in the air like a lullaby. Tomorrow will be another roof, another pot of soup, another game of where did the pig go this time? But for now, the world is quiet, and you are warm enough. There's a trick to getting dressed in a freezing house, and you've mastered it. You sleep in most of your clothes. That helps. Layering is key. 2 tunics, 1 scratchy wool overshirt, and leggings that were once a sack for barley but now do a fine job insulating your shins. But the true skill is the one-handed sock shuffle under a blanket, performed while still half asleep, cursing softly at the toe seam that always folds under just wrong. You manage it. Barely. The sun is up. Though, up is generous. It's more of a smudge behind the clouds. Faint and apologetic, like it overslept and doesn't want to be noticed. You squint at it through the oiled parchment window and decide it's time to deal with the water barrels. Frozen. Again. You trudge outside. The frost crunches under your boots like stale bread. The well is still there, narrow, deep, and as moody as ever. You lower the bucket. It hits with a splash. A good sign. You haul it up, arm muscles straining like a goose tug of war. You pour the contents into a barrel by the house, where it will remain a liquid for approximately 6 minutes before stiffening into medieval ice sculpture. You knock on the barrel anyway, like it owes you rent. Then you head to the animal pen. The pig is in a mood. You respect that. You'd be in a mood too if you'd slept in a drafty shed on a diet of slightly off cabbage and kitchen peelings. She grunts. You grunt back. It's a language of mutual loathing and reluctant affection. The chickens are unimpressed by your arrival. You scatter feed. They peck with the fury of tiny dinosaurs. One jumps and snatches a bit from midair. You applaud. She ignores you. Back indoors. It's baking day. Sort of. It's more like yeast-based improvisation with high emotional stakes. You mix flour, water, and a pinch of salt into something resembling dough. You knead it with both hands and a little of your soul, folding it like old grudges. You set it near the hearth to rise, even though the hearth itself seems to be contemplating retirement. While the dough sleeps, you work on the walls again. They're still shedding flakes of daub like dandruff. You patch and smooth, humming a tune that might be a lullaby or just muscle memory. The children help by stepping directly in wet patches. You do not scream. Instead, you redirect their energy to another task, making toys. Toys in winter aren't for luxury. They're a distraction from cold toes and hunger. You show them how to carve dolls from sticks, how to braid straw into little goats, how to string buttons on twine to make a spinning whirligig. Their laughter fills the room. It's the warmest thing in it. Lunch is whatever's left from last night's stew, with a fresh ladle of boiling water added to give the illusion of volume. You add dried herbs from a cloth bag that smells like last summer. Everyone agrees it's different. No one says, better. The bread is ready. Sort of. It's risen halfway and has the texture of ambition. You bake it anyway, setting it beside the fire on a flat stone. It browns unevenly, but when you tear into it later, steam escapes like a miracle. You butter a slice. Well, not real butter. Rendered fat, whipped to a paste, with a memory of dairy. But still, you close your eyes and chew slowly, pretending it's from a castle banquet. You forget your name for a moment. The afternoon is filled with quiet jobs. You sort lentils. You sew a tear in your best tunic. You check the ceiling beams for damp. You grind grain on the quern stone, circling endlessly with the handle until your shoulders hum with effort. The door thuds. It's your cousin, carrying 2 smoked fish and a complaint about his roof. You offer him tea, again. Generous language for warm water that once saw a leaf, and trade one of your onion bulbs for one of the fish. You discuss snow depth, rat invasions, and whether the reeve is actually measuring the tithes properly. He probably isn't. By now, it's late enough for soup. It's always soup. Tonight's soup features a few flecks of fish, the tail end of some lentils, and a suspicious sprig of green that may or may not be edible. You take the risk. It tastes like hope with a hint of regret. The children play with their stick toys after supper, one of them narrating a saga where the goat rescues a prince from a snow dragon. You nod approvingly. Folk stories need more goats. Your partner mends a boot. You check the firewood pile, counting mentally how long it might last. 3 days, maybe 4 if you get lucky with the kindling. Historians still argue whether peasant households were efficient or simply stubborn beyond reason. You think both can be true. Efficiency is a luxury. Stubbornness is survival. The pig snuffles outside. You imagine she's dreaming of truffles and revenge. You bank the fire. You tuck in the children. You sip one last cup of warmth and lean back against the wall. Eyes half closed. Outside, the wind carries snow across the fields in long, lazy waves. Inside, the silence is soft, not dangerous this time, but earned, like the quiet after laughter. You fall asleep with the smell of bread still on your hands. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. You know it's going to be a long day when the pig greets you before the sun does. She's outside the door, snorting, stomping, muttering things only pigs can mutter. Apparently, she's found a weak spot in the fence again. And apparently, today is not just deal with the pig day, but also rebuild the same section of fence for the 5th time this winter day. You sigh, wrap your cloak tighter, and step into the snow. It crunches underfoot like stale pastry. The wind nibbles at your ears despite the wool cap you've tied on with something that may once have been a sock. The pig gives you a look. The kind of look that says, "You should be grateful I didn't eat the chickens." You aren't sure she's joking. Repairing a fence in winter is like trying to wrestle furniture while your fingers slowly freeze into antique utensils. You gather branches, rope, and resolve. You hammer, lash, twist. The pig watches. You mutter that next year she's learning to knit. Eventually, the fence holds. For now, back inside, your hands sting as they thaw. You flex your fingers. The joints click. Your partner hands you a mug of hot barley water. You don't ask how old the barley is. It's warm. It counts. Breakfast is leftover bread softened in broth. You pretend it's a new recipe. The children pretend to believe you. Everyone smiles with the grim professionalism of those who've endured worse. Then it's time for communal duty. You've been volunteered, again, for road clearing. The main path to the church is half buried. And while technically it's the Reeves' job to coordinate village labor, coordination, in this case, means pointing at things and looking stern. You trudge out with a few others, shovels in hand, and start digging. It's slow work. The snow is heavy, wet, and determined. Your breath fogs with every motion. Someone tells a joke about a monk, a snowdrift, and a missing goat. It doesn't make sense, but it lightens the mood. A teenager tries to sled on a broken shield. It ends badly, predictably, and with applause. You pause halfway through to catch your breath. A local widow offers everyone a sip from a flask of something fermented and mysterious. It burns in your throat and warms your stomach. You don't ask what's in it. No one ever does. By midday, the path is clear enough for the priest's donkey to walk it without vanishing. Success. You trudge home victorious, cold, wet, and smelling faintly of whatever was in that flask. Lunch is onion broth with oat dumplings. Calling them dumplings is generous. They're chewy, uneven, and one seems to contain a pebble. But the broth is hot, and the children dunk their bread like tiny nobles at a feast. You finish your mug and go check the grain stores. The barrel creaks as you open it. A fine layer of flour dust greets you, comforting in its familiarity. You stir it gently with a scoop, inspecting for mold or uninvited guests. It's holding, barely. You make a mental note to ration harder. Your partner mentions the chimneys acting strange. You climb up with a broom tied to a rope and a prayer. The smoke's been curling back into the house lately, leaving everything smelling like disappointment. You scrub the flue from above, soot snowing down like ashy confetti. You wonder how long it takes to become part chimney yourself. Back on solid ground, you spend the afternoon mending things. A boot sole, a cracked pot, a child's tunic torn during an impromptu game of Ice Monster. You sew slowly, the rhythm calming. Stitch, pull, stitch, pull. You hum something old, something wordless. The pig knocks over a pail outside. You don't respond. You're setting boundaries. Evening comes with orange light smearing across snowbanks. The sky turns violet. Smoke from half a dozen chimneys rises into the hush. Dinner tonight is something special. Your neighbor traded you a sliver of smoked rabbit. It's hardly enough for a meal, but it flavors the soup richly. You slice one remaining apple thinly and share it around. The children's eyes widen. They eat slowly, reverently. After dinner, you pull out the spinning tools. Wool waits, fluffy and hopeful. You spin thread by firelight, the spindle whirring quietly like an old friend. The children take turns carding, their little hands clumsy but eager. You praise every clump. Historians still argue whether spinning was a meditative practice or sheer necessity. To you, it's both. It quiets the mind, gives the hands something to do, and creates the threads that might become warmth next month. Outside, the snow falls again. You bank the fire with care. You tuck the children into their straw beds. You watch your partner mend a glove, lips pursed in concentration. You crawl under the blankets. The walls creak, the wind sighs, and you let yourself drift, because tomorrow will bring more repairs, more digging, more soup. But tonight? Tonight you've cleared the road, kept the pig from revolution, and fed everyone twice. Not bad for a peasant in winter. Not bad at all. You wake to the sound of a chicken on your chest. She's not supposed to be there. But somehow, in the grand nightly shuffle of warmth-seeking creatures, she's decided your blanket stack is prime real estate. You blink at her. She blinks back. It's unclear who's more surprised. With a gentle sigh, you scoop her up and set her beside the hearth. She clucks once, softly, like a sigh of her own, and begins pecking at imaginary crumbs. It's still early. The kind of early where the fire has barely a pulse. Where your breath fogs the air indoors. And where the cold greets you like a nosy neighbor with opinions about your life choices. You pull your cloak tighter and check the fire. A few embers remain, glowing faintly under the ash. You poke them back to life with practiced affection, like waking a cranky toddler. Then it's time to go outside. And that means the toilet. You steel yourself. Medieval outdoor toilets are not for the faint of heart. Especially in winter. Yours is a wooden box at the edge of the yard with a hole, a bucket, and a smell that could drive away demons. There's a cloth curtain instead of a door, and the wind treats it like a toy. You trudge toward it with the grim resolve of a knight facing a dragon. The snow crunches. Your breath hisses. You squat as quickly as dignity allows. Do what must be done. And flee. You wash your hands with snow. It doesn't help, but it's symbolic. Back inside, your partner is awake and trying to fix a broken buckle with a piece of wire and some inventive cursing. You offer to take over. They decline, possibly to protect you, possibly because it's their only moment of control in a chaotic universe. Breakfast is warm water with oat scraps and last night's garlic crust. You sip in silence. The children bicker over who gets to stir the morning pot. You assign the task to the pig, who promptly tries to eat the ladle. Peace is restored through distraction, a scavenger hunt for dry kindling. Mid-morning brings a visit from the herbalist. She's ancient, wrapped in furs, and smells faintly of mushrooms and something floral. She delivers a small bundle of dried feverfew and licorice root, in exchange for a sack of straw and a story about a dream she had involving a talking stoat. You listen politely. You've heard stranger. She warns you that colds are brewing in the south field. Her tone is ominous, like she's discussing an invading army. She leaves you with instructions. Boil everything. Sleep warm. And don't trust goats with secrets. You nod solemnly. The rest of the morning is spent boiling cloths and reheating broth just in case. You wipe everything with vinegar, which does nothing but impress your partner with your commitment to pretending it works. Then comes the laundry. Ah, winter laundry. A true test of character and patience. You drag the wash tub near the fire. The water is cold before it even hits the cloth. You scrub with soap made from ashes and animal fat. The smell is persuasive. Your knuckles turn pink, then red, then numb. You wring out each piece like it owes you money. Then you string the clothes by the hearth, where they'll drip and steam for hours, filling the room with the damp perfume of soap, smoke, and something you can only describe as village musk. Lunch is turnip stew. Again. But this time, there's a dollop of mustard on top. A luxury. You savor it like it's royal jelly. The afternoon brings snow. Thick, wet flakes falling fast. You stand at the doorway watching the white blanket grow. It's beautiful, and also deeply inconvenient. You throw more straw in the animal stalls. Check the roofline again, and bar the door tighter. You spend the rest of the day indoors, teaching the children to braid twine into cords for kindling bundles. You tell stories about winter monsters, frost sprites, snow owls, and the haunting figure of old Jack Cold Toes who sneaks into houses with leaky roofs. One child asks if old Jack has been here. You glance up at the sagging beam above the hearth and say, "Maybe, but we're not interesting enough for him to visit twice." That earns a laugh. You'll take it. Supper is thick and quiet. The pig snores in her pen. The chickens cluck contentedly on their roost. The fire crackles. You read aloud from an old manuscript borrowed from the church, something about saints who rode bears and healed fevers with their singing. Historians still argue whether such stories were metaphor, miracle, or metaphorical miracle. You just enjoy the way the words sound in the hush of the room. Later, after the children are asleep, you sneak a sip from the herbalist's special brew. It tastes like roots and regret. You sip again. It's growing on you. You curl under the blankets. tracing the lines of frost on the window with your eyes, watching the way they branch like tree limbs across the glass. The wind howls outside, but you are warm. And the chicken on the hearth? She lays an egg. You whisper a thank you and close your eyes. You wake with the unmistakable feeling that the bread has gone weird again. Not bad, weird. There's a difference. Bad bread grows fuzzy or green or starts to smell like a goat's armpit. Weird bread looks too fine. It rises just a little too much. Has a sheen you don't trust. Like it's up to something. You glance at the loaf cooling near the hearth. It sits innocently in its cloth wrap, pretending to be edible. You squint at it. You'll deal with it later. The morning routine starts, as always, with your nose telling you it's still cold. You breathe in, and the inside of your nostrils stiffen slightly. You blow into your hands. Still fingers, still attached. A good start. The water bucket has frozen over again. You crack it with the back of a spoon. The spoon takes it personally. Outside, snow has crusted over the yard. The pig has not moved. She is a lump beneath her straw, occasionally snorting in protest if a snowflake dares land on her. You envy her commitment to passive resistance. You check on the chickens. One is missing. You immediately suspect the fox. Again, you follow the tracks behind the henhouse. Heart sinking, but halfway down the path you spot her, your smallest, scrappiest hen, roosting smugly in a pile of compost, clucking to herself. She has no remorse. She returns to the coop only after you bribe her with a withered apple core. You return indoors, your boots wet and your dignity slightly frostbitten. The bread is still there. You slice it. It crumbles strangely. You sniff it. Still fine. You chew slowly. It tastes like ambition and disappointment. You slather it with goat cheese and pretend it's a feast. The children do the same. The one insists it tastes like sadness. You don't argue. Mid-morning brings a knock at the door. It's your cousin, red-cheeked and full of winter gossip. Apparently, the miller's apprentice tried to skate down the frozen stream on a pair of flattened ladles. He failed, spectacularly. There were witnesses. The story will live forever. Your cousin trades you a wedge of pickled turnip for a coil of dried onion skin and two good stories. One about a cow that swears. One about a traveling monk who claimed to sneeze blessings. You laugh together. And it's warm. Then comes the market talk. Whether to go this week. Whether the path will hold. Whether anyone even has anything to barter. You agree to try tomorrow. Weather permitting. This means prepping your goods. You spend the rest of the morning sorting your winter hoard. Herbs. Patched gloves. Lengths of spun wool. You lay them out, arranging them in a way that screams desperate but resourceful. Your partner adds a few carved buttons and one mildly cursed candle. You break for lunch. Parsnip mash, served warm, and twice. The children spend the early afternoon drawing in ash on flat stones. One sketches what might be a castle. Another draws the pig. The pig is unimpressed. You decide to mend the curtain. The one that separates the sleeping area from the everything else area. It's torn again, likely due to the chickens, or the children, or a spirited disagreement between the two. You stitch slowly, humming as you work. The thread is coarse, but your fingers know the rhythm. It's the same rhythm as spinning, as kneading, as surviving. Outside, a snow squall begins. You pause to watch. Snow whips past the window in furious dance. The trees bend, the world blurs, but inside, you're safe, and there's soup on the fire. And that is enough. Evening brings soup, bread, and speculation. What's in the soup? Some cabbage, a few wild greens, maybe a rogue carrot, maybe not. You've all agreed not to ask. The mystery is part of the flavor now. The bread is gone. The children ask if you'll make more tomorrow. You lie and say yes. You light a candle carved with a crude sun. It's old, nearly burned down, but tonight it glows golden. The flame dances. You watch the shadows it casts on the wall. Long and strange, like ghosts of summer past. Your partner tells a story of their childhood, of a snow so high they tunneled through it, built a house beneath it, and stayed until spring. You wonder if it's true. But it doesn't matter. The children believe it. That's what counts. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had any leisure at all. You laugh. This is leisure. This moment. This story. This quiet hour with nothing left to do but breathe and listen. You bank the fire. You gather the blankets. The pig grunts once, then snores. You fall asleep to the sound of wind curling against the door and your cousin's voice, still echoing faintly in your thoughts, retelling the story of the apprentice and the ladles. And you dream of skating monks, sneezing blessings, and bread that behaves itself. It's the middle of the night when you wake up to the sound of wind whistling through the walls, again. Not howling, not roaring, just whistling, a slow, tuneless note like the house is trying to remember a song it once knew but forgot during the last frost. You roll over, pull the blanket higher, and sigh. You're not even annoyed anymore. Just mildly judged by your own roof. You drift in and out of sleep until the gray of morning finally seeps through the cracks in the shutters. The coals are mostly out. You poke them into reluctant life. Add twigs. Blow gently. Your breath feels louder than the wind. Breakfast is yesterday's soup, thinned with a bit more water and a pinch of salt that may or may not have been swept up with floor dust. It's warm. That's enough. You glance toward the corner of the room where a thin streak of light stabs through a gap in the wood, your newest unwanted window. Today's first chore: patch the wall. You rummage through your stack of future walls, scraps of wood, old leather, a sack that used to hold barley but now smells like boiled onions and despair. You nail it in place with a piece of bent iron and a lot of hope. It holds. For now. You test for wind by holding a candle near the patch. The flame barely wavers. Victory. You consider a second patch but realize you'd be patching over a patch. And at that point, the wall might file a complaint. As the day stretches on, so do your chores. You chop more firewood, which is to say you break sticks over your knee and pretend it counts. Your axe is dull. Sharpening it requires time, patience, and fingers that aren't frozen. So, next week, around midday, the sun comes out. For about 9 minutes, you blink in the brightness like a mole dragged from a tunnel. Everyone else does the same. One of the neighbors even waves, which feels weirdly intimate for winter. Sunlight is rare currency. You don't waste it on chit-chat. The wind dies down. That's your cue to check the roof. You climb up the side ladder slowly, carefully, like you're scaling a particularly judgmental mountain. At the top, the thatch is exactly as you feared, wind stripped in patches, sagging in others, and vaguely accusing you of neglect. You patch it with bundles of straw and reeds, tying it with twine that used to be part of your boot. Priorities. Below, your partner calls up to ask if you're alive. You shout something cheerful. The pig oinks helpfully. Back down. You reward yourself with the good cheese. It's not actually good, but it's not bad, and that's the same thing in winter. You smear it on a crust of bread and chew like a noble at a feast. A knock at the door. It's the neighbor boy with a question. Could he borrow a pot? You say yes. He asks if it has to be clean. You say no. He smiles. You both understand each other. In return, he offers 3 eggs and a dubious jar of something his grandmother calls fire paste. You do not ask what it contains. It's red. It smells sharp. You're curious, a little scared. You put it on bread. You regret it immediately. The pig loves it. You spend the afternoon helping your youngest mend their mittens. They're misshapen, riddled with holes, and possibly cursed. Still, they're better than nothing. You sit by the fire, threading wool through wool, pretending you know what you're doing. The mittens look like confused hamsters, but they're warm. Later, the priest walks by and stops to chat. He's wrapped in 3 cloaks and a smile he's clearly frozen into place. He asks about your soul. You ask about the roof of the church. He laughs. You both know which one is in worse shape. Historians still argue whether faith kept peasants hopeful or distracted. You think sometimes it did both, and sometimes it just gave people something to do between meals. Dinner is thin barley gruel, but the eggs go in, and suddenly it's fancy. You light the lamp early. The wind picks up again. The patched wall holds, though it hums slightly, like it's trying to join in on a lullaby. Your partner pulls out an old riddle scroll, and the children guess badly on purpose. Everyone laughs too much. The pig oinks in protest at being excluded. You add another blanket to the pile. Not because it's colder, because you know it will be. And as you lay down, full on eggs and bad cheese, warm under patched cloth and near hibernating livestock, you let the whistle in the wall lull you to sleep. It sings the same half-song it always does. And somehow, that's enough. You awaken with your nose colder than the rest of your face. which is never a good sign. The fire is a sullen memory in the hearth. And the air inside the house has that thin, sharp edge that lets you know it's somehow colder inside than it is outside. You reach out, find your wool hat, and tug it down over your ears without getting out of bed. Today's mission: survive breakfast. You trudge to the hearth, poke at the ashes, and find one ember still glowing like a stubborn beetle. With care and reverence bordering on worship, you nudge it, feed it some bark peelings, blow gently, and wait for the spark to return. It does, barely. You toss on a log with the delicacy of a surgeon placing a heart into a chest cavity. The room creaks in approval. Then you check the ale. This has become routine in winter. You never quite know if the ale will be drinkable, slush, or one solid brick. This morning, it's the middle one, a sort of chilled porridge with hops. You spoon some into a wooden cup, swirl it, and pretend it's deliberate. You sip and instantly regret it. The flavor is expressive. Breakfast is slices of last week's sausage, which have been hanging near the roof beams like leathery decorations. You boil them briefly with onion peels to soften the taste and your expectations. The result is warm, vaguely meaty, and oddly cheerful. The children devour it like royalty. Mid-morning brings the first real chore of the day: checking the meat pit. Yes, the meat pit, behind the house, dug deep into the frozen ground, is your winter storage, a hole lined with straw, rocks, and a prayer to every saint who guards against mold. You lower yourself slowly, the cold biting through your boots as you descend. Inside, there are bundles of salted fish, wax-wrapped cheese, and a small sack of lard. You inspect each like a paranoid squirrel. Everything looks edible-ish. You grab a chunk of cheese for lunch and climb out, brushing frost from your knees. The sky is already graying. Winter days are more suggestion than reality. You spend midday grinding rye. Your hand quern is ancient, passed down from someone who likely resented it as much as you do. But it works. You add the grain, crank the stone wheel, and try not to think about how long this takes. Grinding grain in winter is oddly meditative. You lose yourself in the rhythm, the slow scrape, the soft plop of flour falling like sleepy snow. Occasionally, you curse under your breath when a pebble sneaks in. By noon, your hands are cramped and your flour pile looks modest, but it's enough for a flatbread or three. You decide to treat everyone and mix in a pinch of leftover honey. Lunch is warm, sweet-ish, and shockingly festive. The children sing a song about the bread that didn't cry this time. You're unsure if it's a compliment. The afternoon is quiet, too quiet, which means a storm is coming. You feel it in your teeth, in your knees, in the way the pig huffs and paces and then burrows deeper into her straw like she's hiding from a prophecy. You check the doorframe for drafts. 2 new ones have joined the party. You grab a sackcloth, wedge it into the gap, then rub the door hinges with lard to stop the squeaking. Now the door closes silently, ominously. You're not sure if that's better. Then comes the decision. Use the last of the garlic in tonight's stew? It's bold, but it's also Tuesday. You figure if any day deserves garlic, it's the one smack in the middle of nearly froze to death again week. You say yes. You also find one withered carrot behind a stack of dried nettles. It's a miracle, possibly haunted. Dinner smells like hope. As the stew simmers, the sky darkens, the wind rises. You gather everyone close and light the extra lamp, the one with the blue glass shade. It makes the walls glow softly, like the inside of a seashell. You pass out wool socks, check for extra holes, and declare the cleanest pair the winner. Everyone claps politely. Then the stew is served. It's hot, garlicky, and makes your eyes water in a way that feels cleansing. The pig licks her lips in solidarity. After dinner, the children put on a play. It's titled The Day the Chicken Got Inside the Cheese Barrel. It is mostly improvised. There are roles for the goat, off stage, the cheese, a hat, and the hero, played with tragic gravitas by your eldest. You laugh until you wheeze. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had formalized entertainment or simply invented joy in between catastrophes. You think the answer is obvious. Later, as the storm hits, you listen. The wind rattles the shutters like an impatient guest. Snow taps at the roof. The pig grunts and turns. The fire hisses like it knows something you don't. You add a log. You wrap yourself tighter. You check the garlic stash. Empty. Worth it. You sleep with a full belly. Warm feet. and the faint memory of a chicken wearing a hat. You wake up to coughing. Not the sick kind, well, not exclusively. More like the full family chorus of wintry throat clearing that greets each morning like a foghorn made of phlegm and frost. It's oddly comforting. You add your own contribution and roll out of bed into the swirling chill. Your breath forms little clouds as you talk to yourself. Today's to-do list is simple: don't get sick. Or, more realistically, don't get sicker. The fire has dwindled, but not entirely vanished. You throw on a few sticks and coax it back to life. The hearth grudgingly obeys, belching smoke at you in protest. You know what this means. Time to sweep the chimney. Again. But first, tea. Or at least, the closest thing you've got. You boil water with dried mint, a pinch of dandelion root, and a hope that it doesn't taste like boiled dirt this time. It does, but it's warm dirt. You sip slowly while wrapped in 3 shawls and one child who refuses to get out from under your blanket pile. Breakfast is forgettable: a crust of bread, slightly frozen cheese, and something that might once have been a pear. But it's edible, and your stomach grumbles its thanks. The coughing returns. It's your neighbor this time, hacking like a medieval accordion across the road. You hear it through the shutters. A familiar tune, if not a pleasant one. You sigh. It's time to check on everyone. You bundle up like a winter cabbage, tie your outer cloak with twine, and crunch your way through fresh snow. The wind blows hard from the west, the kind of cold that slaps your eyebrows. First stop, the neighbor's cottage. Inside, it smells of boiled onions and worn wool. The neighbor sits hunched by the fire, swaddled in everything they own. They wave you in, offer a ladle of something between soup and tea, and talk through coughs. You listen, you nod, you offer your own remedy: a rag soaked in warm vinegar tied around the neck. It's mostly superstition, but it smells intense enough to feel medicinal. They accept it like you've offered a miracle. Historians still argue whether medieval remedies actually helped or merely gave people something to do. You lean toward the latter. But at least vinegar has never backfired quite like leeches did. You return home with cold feet and a warm feeling of neighborly success. Your own youngest is sneezing now. You set them up near the fire with a sheepskin and a cup of garlic broth. They look at you with betrayal, but drink it anyway. You remind them that garlic frightens both illness and demons. They are unimpressed by this argument. Your partner, meanwhile, prepares the plague mix. It's just dried herbs, pressed into balls with honey and stored in waxcloth. You call them cough candies. The children call them yuck bombs. Still, they work well enough to fool the mind, if not the lungs. The day trudges on with wool mending, blanket shaking, and the ritual cleaning of noses using handkerchiefs made from your oldest shirt. You gave up on decorum somewhere around week 2 of winter. By afternoon, your cousin arrives, with gossip and a rash. Not contagious, they swear, just cold-related. You squint. Possibly true, possibly drama. Either way, you brew them a fresh batch of herbal tea and offer the yuck bomb. They accept both with a flourish and tell you about the shepherd's wife who claims she hasn't sneezed since summer. The conversation turns to the fever, a vague term used for any ailment involving sweat, shakes, or existential dread. 3 people in the next village overhave it. No one knows why. One of them insists it was caused by a dream. Theories fly. Rats, bad air, cursed bread, angry saints. All valid, all equally unhelpful. You nod solemnly, then distract everyone with carrot cake dreams. You describe it in vivid, impossible detail: spices, sugar, nuts, the whole fantasy. It's a bedtime story for adults. Everyone sighs. Dinner is barley stew with chopped onions and a cube of dried pork. The children fall quiet, spooning warmth into themselves like it's magic. One declares they feel better already. Placebo or miracle, you don't care. That night, you place warm stones near the children's feet under the blankets. You double up their socks. You whisper jokes about garlic ghosts and sneezing witches. The fire crackles softly. Outside, the wind has calmed, but your neighbor's cough echoes faintly over the snow. You light a candle in the window anyway, just in case someone else needs to find their way through the dark. You wrap yourself in layers. Listen to the familiar wheezes and snores of a family surviving winter together, and smile into the dark. Another day survived, another cough soothed, another night of warm feet and garlic dreams. You know it's going to be a strange day when the pig sneezes before anyone else. She snorts, grumbles, and then decisively rolls over into a heap of straw, announcing she's off duty. You get the message. Today will be one of those days, where the air is somehow thick with cold and yet thinner to breathe. And everything smells faintly of old broth and damp wool. Someone is already coughing again. It's a different one this time. Your partner. Low and wet, like a kettle that doesn't quite whistle anymore. You hand them the last of the cough drops, the yuck bombs of honey and herbs, and they suck on it like a martyr. Breakfast is quiet. Everyone's tired of the cold, tired of gruel, tired of being tired. You stir the pot with the same spoon you used yesterday and possibly the day before. It's less food and more warm tradition at this point. You do your rounds of the house, checking the weak points. Draft under the door. Plugged. Frost on the inside of the window. Normal. Icicle forming inside the chamber pot lid. Unexpected. Mildly insulting. You open the shutter a crack. Outside is gray on gray. Spitting flakes of snow like someone shaking sugar from a great height with poor aim. The village is muffled and cold. You pull on your cloak and make for the healer's hut. The village healer is not what you'd call certified. She's old, smells like thyme and something unspoken, and has at least 3 stories for every leaf in her apothecary jar. But she's kept more people upright than the priest and the midwife combined. So no one questions her authority. Not twice. Anyway, she greets you with a toothy smile and a nod toward the fire. Cold bones? She says. You nod. Sick ones? Another nod. She mixes you a bundle of dried angelica root, fennel, and some mysterious red bark. She says it wards off the lung demons. You raise an eyebrow. She tells you the price, 1 button, and a promise to help her grandson learn how to read. Deal. Historians still argue whether medieval medicine was based more on hope or habit. You suspect it was mostly about keeping busy, so no one noticed how little could be done. But sometimes the warmth of a hand, a look, a shared story, that was its own medicine. You tuck the herbs into your cloak and trudge back home, where the pig is now deeply offended you left. At lunch, you boil water with the new herbs and pour it into mugs. The children sniff it suspiciously, then try to outdo each other with how gross it tastes. One says it tastes like bark and fire. Another, like sadness and soup. Your partner declares it weirdly comforting. The children pretend to be poisoned for the next 10 minutes. You pretend to summon the healer's ghost for revenge. Everyone ends up laughing. It's healing in its own way. Later, you set up a sick corner, layered sheepskins, an extra wool cap, and a bucket nearby, just in case. Whoever feels worst gets to sit there like royalty. You dub it, the throne of sneeze. The youngest volunteers immediately. You teach them how to boil nettle leaves for tea. They insist it smells like swamp. You insist it's healthy. They whisper to the pig to fake a cough next time so she can take the throne. Dinner is thin broth and some miraculous root vegetables your cousin bartered from a traveler. You don't ask questions, just dice them up and praise the stew like it was touched by saints. You go to bed that night under the heaviest blanket, listening to the familiar sounds of recovery. Wheezing, sniffles, the occasional soft burp from the garlic tea. And somehow, it's soothing. You remember stories of noble lords who died from a chill in their castle towers. Surrounded by riches but lacking a good fire. Or a good pig. You feel lucky. You close your eyes. And the last thing you hear is the pig sneezing again. Softly. You wake to the unmistakable scent of something not burning. Which is suspicious. Most mornings carry the faint perfume of scorched porridge, smoldering straw, or someone's woolen sock too close to the fire. But today, everything smells fine, almost pleasant. This is concerning. You shuffle to the hearth, expecting disaster. Instead, you find your partner already awake, feeding the fire like it owes them rent. They greet you with a tired nod and point toward the pot. It's steaming. Something smells like thyme. And, could it be? Onions? You blink at the pot like it just proposed marriage. Got a trade, they say, and pull out a tiny sack of turnips from under a blanket like a magician revealing a rabbit. You bless them in 3 languages. You don't waste time. Breakfast is hot, savory, and eaten so quickly the steam barely has time to leave the bowls. The children dunk crusty bread into the pot and call it fancy soup. One declares this the best day since the garlic incident. High praise. You finish your bowl, stretch, and realize something strange. Your joints ache slightly less than usual. The house isn't warm, per se, but it's also not colder than the outside. This, you decide, is the medieval version of luxury. Today, you'll do something truly outrageous: tidy up. You start with the floor. Sweeping in winter is more of a symbolic gesture than a practical one. But it makes you feel mildly powerful. You attack dust and straw like they insulted your mother. You even find a spoon you thought lost to the fire gods. Victory. Next comes the corner where you've been meaning to store kindling. You organize it by stick size, which no one will appreciate but you. Still, it sparks a faint glow of satisfaction. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants had time for such vanity projects. But when you're snowed in and the pig refuses to talk to you, even stick arranging starts to feel like art therapy. Later, you attempt to fix the bench. It's been wobbling since midsummer, and one leg is now shorter than the others by a toe's width, just enough to launch an unsuspecting guest sideways. You prop it on a stone for now, declaring it rustic. The children use it as a balance game. The pig avoids it with disdain. Around midday, the village bell rings. Once a visitor, you wrap yourself up and head outside. Heart doing that slow, suspicious thump that says, "Please not tax collectors. Please not plague messengers." It's neither. It's the peddler. She appears like a walking curtain, layers upon layers of cloaks, scarves, shawls, and oddments tied around her waist. She jingles with every step. The children call her the fabric ghost. She calls herself Sabine. You welcome her in with a mug of hot onion broth and a seat near the fire. She accepts both with grace and a sigh that could warm soup. Then she opens her bag. It's a miracle in linen. Buttons, thread, 3 combs, 2 intact, dried berries, a chipped mirror, and, be still your heart, a whole stick of cinnamon. You stare. She names her price: 1 pair of wool socks, a story, and a night's rest indoors. Done, done, and done. The story is about the time the priest fell through the ice trying to rescue a goose who, it turned out, could swim perfectly well. Sabine laughs so hard she spills her broth. You declare it worth the laundry. She shares her own tale in return, of a village far south where people use heated stones in wooden shoes and never get frostbite. You're not sure if it's true. You want it to be. That night, she sleeps in the corner under a pile of cloaks. The pig keeps a suspicious eye on her but ultimately allows the arrangement. Before you sleep, you sniff the cinnamon again. It's sharp, sweet, and strange, like a memory of warmth from another lifetime. You smile and tuck it away in the special pouch you keep for rare treasures. Tomorrow, you'll sprinkle a little in the morning stew. Just to see. You fall asleep to the sound of distant wind and the peddler's soft snores. And you dream of heated shoes. You wake to the smell of cinnamon. Just a hint, barely there, but it's real, and you smile before your eyes are even open. The hearth is already crackling. Someone, likely Sabine, has beaten you to the fire and is humming a tune that sounds like it belongs in a warmer season. She nods at you, ladles a bit of porridge into a bowl, and, with the flourish of a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat, adds a single shaving of cinnamon. Your children stare at it like it's a sacred rite. You take your first bite and it tastes otherworldly. The same old oats, the same grayish bowl, but this time touched with something almost festive. For a moment, you forget your aching joints and the frost creeping down the walls. For a moment, you're a king at breakfast. The pig snorts in envy. After breakfast, Sabine packs up her bundle. She ties a red cord around her sack, adjusts her many layers, and thanks everyone with a nod and a saying that doesn't quite translate. Something about how cold feet mean you've walked far enough. Then she vanishes into the snow like a story you once heard but forgot how it ended. You wave, the children wave, the pig waves, emotionally. If not physically. The house feels emptier without her. But not in a bad way. More like a quiet has returned. The sort that makes space for something new. You stretch, rub your hands, and declare today a deep winter inventory day. This is met with groans, of course. Inventory day means crawling into corners, poking around the loft, and counting everything that hasn't yet molded, frozen solid, or been repurposed into a new garment. It's peasant bookkeeping, without the books. You begin in the food stores. The cheese is holding strong. The fish, less so. One batch has grown something you're not willing to discuss with the children. You discreetly remove it, wrap it in rags, and bury it under the compost. The compost grumbles in response. Next, the candles. You count them with reverence. Like little golden guardians of sanity. Only 7 left. 3 tall. 4 stubs. You debate whether to melt the stubs into one Frankenstein candle. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had this sort of decision fatigue. You're living proof that they did. Then there's the salt. Oh, salt. The real treasure. You find 1 pouch. Dry and mostly intact. You weigh it in your palm like a jewel. 1 pinch of this can turn boiled turnips from sad mistake into soup with ambition. You hide it in the same drawer where you keep spare thread and your emergency optimism. Midday comes with a rare surprise, sunshine. It filters in through the shutters like golden breath. You open one window just a sliver and let the light pour in. For a moment, the dust motes dance like fairies. The children chase them with giggles. Catching nothing but joy, you decide to air out the bedding. This is a bold move. The air outside is sharp, but dry. You haul the sheepskins and blankets out into the light, drape them over fences and branches, and watch as they steam slightly in the sun. The pig takes this opportunity to roll in fresh straw and remind you who really owns the yard. Back inside, the air feels cleaner already. The floorboards creak in approval. You use the moment to mend socks. There's a pile of them, all vaguely foot-shaped but full of personality. One has a hole so big it qualifies as an open-toe design. You patch it with mismatched wool and a little embroidery. A star, just because. Later, a traveler passes by. He doesn't stop long, just enough to ask for directions and trade 2 buttons for a slice of bread. His shoes are held together with twine. You give him a scrap of leather and wish him warmth. He thanks you with a nod that says more than words. Dinner is humble, some root mash, a bit of sausage scraped from the bottom of the barrel, and a crust of bread that you soften with warm broth. But the kids are cheerful. One makes a hat out of cabbage leaves and insists they're now royalty. No one argues. The fire burns steady, the wind outside has calmed, and the house smells faintly of cinnamon, wood smoke, and onions. You wrap yourself in layers, settle into your creaky chair, and smile. Some days don't need drama to feel full. Just warmth, a patched sock, and the lingering magic of borrowed spice. You close your eyes. Tomorrow will bring new cold, new coughs, new laughter. But tonight, you sleep with cinnamon dreams. You wake to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the suspicious kind. The kind that usually means snow has swallowed the world and everyone is still asleep because they know better than to deal with it yet. You rise slowly, pull your cloak tighter, and crack the door open a few inches. White, everywhere. A fresh blanket of snow has smoothed the world into one enormous, quiet sigh. The pig peeks out from her straw heap and promptly buries herself again. Sensible creature. You tiptoe through the house. The fire's still asleep, so you coax it back to life with the soft murmurs of someone trying not to swear in front of children. The wood cracks, complains, but finally gives in. Orange light returns to the room. So does warmth, slowly. Like an old friend with joint pain. The first child emerges, rubbing their eyes and asking the essential question, "Is there porridge?" You nod and get to work. Breakfast is thinner than usual. Supplies are low, but you sprinkle in just enough dried apple to trick everyone's taste buds into thinking this is a feast. You call it apple winter delight. They don't believe you, but they eat it anyway. After breakfast, it's snow shoveling time, which, in this era, means move snow with whatever vaguely flat object is nearby. You end up using a split board and a strong sense of spite. The children help by throwing snowballs at each other. One hits you squarely on the back of the head. You vow revenge. Outside, the village is quiet. Everyone's doing the same thing, clearing paths, shaking roofs, muttering about how winter used to be colder or warmer or somehow both. You check on the neighbor again. The old woman who lives 2 cottages down. She's bundled up like a turnip in a quilt, sitting by her fire, talking to a lump of wool she insists is a cat. You nod. You understand. She offers you a hot drink that tastes like boiled twigs and hope. You sip it gratefully. Historians still argue whether elderly peasants were genuinely cared for or simply left alone unless they had food to trade. But here, in this snowy silence, You know the truth is often softer, quieter, more woven into everyday kindness than the records show. You return home with a red nose and slightly better spirits. Midday brings a strange project, snow insulation. You and the children pack snow around the base of the house. The way you were taught by that shepherd's cousin who swore it kept in heat. It feels counterintuitive, but the wind stops whistling through the floorboards. So maybe it works, or maybe you're just too cold to care. In the afternoon, the wind picks up again. Not the biting kind, but the sighing kind. It whispers around corners, through that crack near the chimney, past your ears like it's trying to share secrets from centuries ago. You light a candle early. Dinner is roasted turnips and cabbage, nothing fancy. But the pan gets hot enough to caramelize the edges. And suddenly it smells like a festival. You declare it feast night. The children make paper crowns out of old parchment. The pig gets an extra scoop of scraps and looks deeply unimpressed. After dinner, everyone gathers near the fire. It's storytelling time. Tonight, the tale is yours. About the great blizzard of 2 winters ago. When the snow reached the thatch and the chimney was the only exit. You describe how you dug your way out with a ladle. They laugh, then gasp, then laugh again. Then your partner tells their story. About the time they tried to ski on fence rails and ended up in a snowbank with a goose on their head. That gets applause. Story by story, the evening melts into warmth. By the time the last candle flickers low, everyone is sleepy. Blankets rustle. Spoons clink softly in empty bowls. The pig sighs in her sleep like a wheezy accordion. You sit by the fire a little longer. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Quietly, patiently. A soft blanket pulled over the world once more. You lean back, your bones creaking in time with the floorboards. And close your eyes. Today, you've survived the silence. Tomorrow, you'll rise to whatever comes. And maybe, just maybe, there will still be apple slices. The roof creaks before you even open your eyes. It's that slow, deliberate groan that only happens when snow decides to settle in and make itself at home. You blink your way into consciousness and tug the blanket higher. Just 5 more minutes. But the pig has other ideas. She grumbles, then squeals, then headbutts her way against the side door like a battering ram made of bacon. Apparently, she's decided snow be damned. She has business in the yard. Probably something important, like rolling in slush or judging the firewood stack. You throw on your thickest cloak, which smells faintly of onions and last week's broth, and step outside. The world is white and glowing. The snow is knee-deep in places, thigh-deep in others, and slipperier than your uncle's storytelling at tax season. You step cautiously. You almost stay upright. Almost. After dusting off your dignity, you begin the morning rituals, shoveling the front path, checking the roofline for icicles that look like medieval daggers, and knocking snow off the thatch before it collapses onto the pig's sleeping nook. Your hands go numb almost instantly. You wiggle your fingers and mutter the ancient peasant chant, "Should have moved to Spain." Back inside, breakfast is porridge again, surprise. But today, there's a drizzle of honey thanks to the beeswax trade you made last month. The sweetness tastes like summer pretending to be brave. The children eat in silence at first. Then one asks a question. How do we know spring is real? You stare at them, then at the snow-crusted window. Then back at them. Well, you say, because sometimes the pig sheds early. They nod like this is deeply profound. Perhaps it is. You spend the morning crafting emergency mittens out of old rags and bits of felt. They're ugly. They work. One child declares theirs fashionable, and immediately loses it under the table. You gather everyone for a midday task, checking the attic for roof leaks. Climbing into the loft is not your favorite chore. It smells like damp hay and decisions you regret. But it's necessary. You poke around with a lantern and spot the telltale signs, dark spots, soft drips, a spider who looks very disappointed in your insulation. You patch what you can with clay and fabric. The rest, you mark with chalk, fix later. Preferably when not freezing. Historians still argue whether medieval attics were used for storage or just sadness. Yours leans toward both. Back downstairs, you realize you're out of tallow. Which means no new candles. Which means an urgent trip to the neighbor who owes you one. You brave the snow again, slipping only twice, and arrive half frozen at their door. They welcome you in with a bowl of suspiciously good stew. You pretend not to notice the venison. They pretend not to notice your frost-bitten eyebrow. You make your trade, one wooden spoon and a lullaby in exchange for 2 precious lumps of tallow. You return home a hero. Dinner is root mash again, but now with a side of victory. That evening, you attempt a small celebration. Nothing big, just candlelight, a shared story, and some music made by banging wooden spoons against bowls. One child sings a song about the pig's love life. The pig looks mortified. Then, as the fire dies down, your partner produces a surprise, a sliver of dried pear. From the bottom of the winter stash, you cut it into paper-thin slices and pass them around. Everyone closes their eyes as they chew, pretending it's a feast. A memory, a promise. You look around at the faces glowing in the candlelight. Outside, the wind howls gently against the walls. But inside, it's warm, soft, safe. You yawn, stretch, tuck the pig in with a fresh blanket of straw. And you think to yourself, maybe spring is real. Because tonight, no one's coughing, and the roof hasn't caved in, and the pear tasted like sunshine. You dream of green, not metaphorical green, literal green. Blades of grass poking through thawed earth, leaves dancing on branches, fat peas in a pod you somehow eat like popcorn. It's warm in the dream, almost sweaty. You wake up smiling, and instantly regret it. The inside of your nose is frozen. Again, the fire's gone out overnight, and the hearth feels like the inside of a well. You sit up wrapped in every piece of cloth you own and stare into the ashes with quiet betrayal. You whisper something not appropriate for church, then get to work. You restart the fire using the last of the kindling and a prayer whispered in the language of smoke and fingers crossed. It catches, finally, and the pig opens one eye like she's been personally inconvenienced. Breakfast is what you now generously call pottage mush. Mostly barley, possibly lentils, maybe a turnip or two from the pile that started to look like a still life painting of despair. You stir in a pinch of dried greens to make it taste like something other than Tuesday. One of the children asks, "Are those herbs?" You pause. Yes, very magical herbs. They eat them suspiciously, but with hope. Afterward, the house needs tending, not cleaning, tending. The shutters rattle like a nervous skeleton. One hinge is loose. You wrap a bit of cloth around the fastener and tie it with twine. The fix is about as elegant as a pig in a bonnet. But it holds. You pat it like a pet and move on. Laundry comes next. You wash clothes in icy water, your fingers going numb with every rain. The soap is almost gone, more ash than soap. Really, but it gets the job done. The garments freeze stiff on the line before you even finish hanging them. The children use them as snow swords. You decide not to stop them. Then comes the latrine. It's frozen. You won't talk about it. You just do what needs to be done and come back inside with a new appreciation for modern plumbing, whatever that is. Around midday, there's a knock at the door. It's not really a knock, more of a rhythmic scraping. You open it to find Brother Thomas from the Abbey, wrapped in 3 robes and looking like a monk-shaped snowman. He carries a bundle of books. Not to sell, just to show. You let him in and offer warm broth. He shows you an old herbal manuscript, written in Latin and footnotes. You pretend to understand while pointing at the illustrations and saying, "Aha," a lot. The children are fascinated by the drawings. One insists they've seen that plant growing near the pig pen. You make a mental note to investigate later. Brother Thomas stays for an hour, then leaves behind a page he copied for you. Something about preserving herbs in lard. You fold it carefully and slide it between your 2 driest planks. That's now your library. Historians still argue whether literacy among peasants was common. They don't argue whether peasants loved stories. Because even if you can't read, you can listen, and you do. That night, you share a story of your own. You tell the tale of the winter fox, the one who tricked the frost into letting spring arrive early. The children listen wide-eyed. The pig grunts skeptically. Your partner adds a dramatic ending where the fox marries a goose and they live in a hut made of firewood. Everyone applauds. You go to bed smiling. The wind howls, the roof creaks, and somewhere in the corner, the pig snores. But the fire stays lit this time. The broth pot is full, and there's a page of handwritten words tucked into your wall. Waiting for spring. You dream again, and this time, the grass is even greener. You wake to rain, not the cheerful kind that skips across rooftops and washes away winter's final breath. No, this is the heavy, slushy kind, the kind that seeps through thatch, slides down your neck, and makes everything smell like wet dog and sour straw. You sigh. The pig sighs. The roof drips in agreement. This is the part of winter no one writes songs about. The in-between. Too wet for snow. Too cold for mud. Too early for spring. You light the fire again. Carefully this time. Everything is damp. The logs hiss like offended cats. And it takes a solid 20 minutes of coaxing with straw, breath, and a tiny prayer to get a proper flame going. Once it catches, you guard it like it's royalty. Breakfast is a bit of a mystery. Last night's leftovers mixed with this morning's ambition. There's a turnip, possibly some barley. The flavor is best described as edible. The children add salt. The pig does not get any. She's still recovering from last night's pea incident. After breakfast, the roof must be dealt with. There's a leak near the corner, dripping steadily into your grain sack. Not ideal. You climb up with a patch of thatch, a ball of string, and your pride. The climb is wobbly. The repair is questionable. The view, however, is something. From up here, you see the village under its soggy blanket, smoke curling from chimneys, chickens darting through puddles, that one neighbor who insists on airing his boots on a pole like a weather ritual. You take it all in, then descend like a victorious, if slightly soaked, hero. Your partner greets you with a warm cloth and a look that says, "You're not 20 anymore." You nod. You weren't even 20 when you were 20. As the rain continues, the indoor chores multiply. There are baskets to reweave, shirts to patch, shoes to pretend aren't falling apart. You settle into the work slowly, rhythmically. The children take turns threading needles and telling each other wildly inaccurate stories about ancient kings who ate nothing but cheese and ruled from a throne of moss. One of them suggests you all make wax dolls to hang by the door for luck. You pause. It's an old tradition. Maybe nonsense. Maybe not. But what else do you have to do? You melt the ends of the candle stubs, shape little figures out of scraps, and hang them by red thread on the lintel. Do they work? A child asks. Only if you believe in them harder than the weather. They nod solemnly. One adds a hat to their doll. Another gives theirs a stick, just in case. Historians still argue whether medieval superstitions were sincere or survival theater. You think it's both. And in moments like these, neither really matters. Belief is warmth too. By afternoon, the rain has found its way into everything. Your socks are soggy. The woodpile is sulking. Even the cat, borrowed from next door, refuses to leave the dry patch beneath the bench. So you call for music. Not instruments. You don't have any of those. But spoons, bowls, pots, and voices, those you do have. The room becomes a storm of joyful noise. Someone chants. Someone hums. Someone tries to beatbox with a jug. It's terrible. It's perfect. The pig dances. Briefly. Dinner is soup. More accurately, hot water with memories of vegetables. But there's bread. Real bread. Baked on the hearth with the last of the flour. It smells divine. You ration it like relics. The crust crackles. The middle steams. One child declares it, the bread of kings. You pretend not to cry. That night, the rain turns to sleet. You listen to it tap the shutters like fingers trying to get in. But you are safe, warm, full of stories and slightly burnt bread. The dolls dangle above the door, watching with melted wax smiles. You lie down slowly, blanket pulled high, body weary but satisfied. Tomorrow, it might snow again, or freeze, or flood. But tonight, the house holds strong, the fire glows soft, and your dreams smell faintly of fresh bread. The sun is pretending today. It rises behind a veil of fog, casting everything in a pale, silvery light that makes the world look less like a village and more like a very confused painting. You squint through the haze, wondering if the barn is still where you left it. Probably. The air is cold but not sharp. A hush hangs over the land, the kind that makes your breath feel louder than usual. Your footsteps unnecessarily dramatic. Even the pig walks gently this morning, as if not wanting to disturb whatever spell the fog has cast. You feed her early. She seems grateful, which is rare. She also doesn't try to bite your boot, which is rarer. The frost on the windows has etched itself into fern-like patterns again, curling and blooming in perfect silence. One of the children says it looks like a message from the spirits. Another says it looks like cabbage. You agree with both. Today is about preparation. Not for a blizzard, not for a feast, just for tomorrow. Whatever it may bring. You check the stock of dried beans. Thin, salted fish, lower than you remembered. The apples? Gone. The children smile innocently. The pig does not. You head out to trade. The path to the next hamlet over is frozen solid, rutted with cart tracks and lined with skeletal trees that look like they're leaning in to whisper gossip. You keep walking, one foot, then the other, wrapped in layers of wool and stubbornness. At the trade post, you swap old cloth for a sack of barley and a pouch of something labeled medicinal root. You don't ask what kind. You assume it's bitter. Everything is. You hear rumors while you're there, of wolves near the forest edge, of a priest who slipped on ice and proclaimed a divine punishment, of someone spotting the first crocus near a sunlit stone. The last one gives you hope. Almost too much. Historians still argue whether peasants truly believed in omens or if they simply needed something to believe in. You think both. Again. And also, why not? The world is harsh enough. Let it speak in flowers if it wants to. The walk home is slower. Partly because the barley is heavier than expected. Partly because your boots are filled with the kind of regret only wet socks can cause. But you make it back. The children cheer. Not for you, of course. But for the barley. They begin chanting, porridge party, and create a conga line with spoons. You let them. Dinner is indeed porridge, but fancy porridge. There's a dash of nutmeg from a forgotten spice pouch. And someone finds a raisin. One raisin. It is cut into 4 parts and shared like a sacred relic. After dinner, you decide to tell fortunes. You do not know how to tell fortunes. But you pretend, because sometimes pretending is the closest thing to magic. You hold hands, close your eyes, and speak in your most serious tone. I see. A very muddy spring. Gasps all around. You continue, and I see a pig, wearing a flower crown. The pig looks up, blinks, goes back to sleep. One of the children declares this the best day of winter. No reason, just feels that way. The fog begins to lift outside. Slowly, like a curtain being drawn back from a stage you forgot you were on. The moon appears, low and yellow, caught in a net of bare branches. You stand by the window, a cup of warm broth in hand, and listen to the quiet. Tomorrow, you might see that crocus. Or it might snow again. Or both. But tonight, there is stillness. There is warmth. There is barley. You lean back into your chair, the fire crackling gently, and feel something rare and soft settle over you. Not happiness exactly, but peace. Today begins with a whisper. Not from the wind, for once, but from the walls themselves, wood and wattle sighing as the morning cold gives way to something softer. You feel it the moment you open your eyes. The air smells different, less like ash, more like thaw. You sit up slowly, wrapped in blankets that have somehow molded to your shape over the winter, and stretch until your joints make that familiar peasant music, snaps, cracks, and a low groan that might also have come from the pig. She's already up, sitting by the door, waiting. You squint at her. She squints back. Together, you go outside. There's still frost clinging to the eaves, but the sky above is less gray and more something like blue if you really believe in it, and the ground, muddy. Which means warmer. Which means everything. You step carefully, boots sinking with a squelch that's deeply unpleasant and deeply promising. The air has bite, yes, but also breath. You can almost taste something alive in it, something old stirring. You return inside with that feeling tucked behind your ribs. The fire is easy today. The wood doesn't fight you. The soup doesn't taste like punishment. Even the children wake themselves up. One even volunteers to fetch water. You check their forehead. It's a new mood, a pre-spring sort of madness. Your partner suggests cleaning. You suggest pretending they didn't say that. They win. So you begin the great thawing. The corners where cobwebs turned to curtains. The tools piled like a history of forgotten chores. That one pair of boots that no longer resemble boots but more wet paper with ambition. You sweep. You sort. You discover a piece of cheese so aged it might now qualify as a philosopher. In the process, you unearth a woven blanket. Long forgotten. It smells like yesteryear and mouse. You shake it out in the yard, and the wind carries the dust like a blessing. The pig tries to eat it. Of course. Lunch is turnip stew, slightly improved by the last of the onion scraps. A feast, by winter standards. You all eat around the hearth and take turns describing the clouds as animals. One child insists there's a dragon with mittens up there. You don't see it, but you nod enthusiastically. In the afternoon, work continues. The fields are still too frozen to till. But the tools need inspecting. You pull out the rusted hoe, the bent spade, and the rake missing 3 teeth. You sit with them like old friends and begin the ritual sharpening. There's something meditative about it. Metal on stone, the scrape-scrape rhythm, the slow restoration. It feels like you're waking them up. And yourself. Historians still argue whether peasants anticipated spring or endured it when it came. You believe anticipation was part of survival. A kind of fuel. You sharpen tools. Yes, but also hope. You take a walk in the evening. Not far. Just beyond the garden plot. Toward the edge of the woods. The snow has receded there. Like a shy guest. And in its place? Moss. Actual moss. Green. Soft. Undeniable. You bend down. Touch it. You smile. On your way back, you gather twigs and fallen branches. Firewood tomorrow. Firewood is always tomorrow. Back at the house, dinner is light, mostly because the pantry is light. But no one complains. Not tonight. You end the day with a story about the ancient days when winter fled the earth for good. Chased away by dancing children and talking birds. It makes no sense. Everyone loves it. Then silence settles in. Not the bleak silence of midwinter, but something gentler, expectant, like the house is holding its breath. You lie down. The pig settles near your feet. The fire glows low and kind. Outside, something drips, meltwater from the roof. And you think, maybe it's true. Maybe winter is starting to slip away. The road to market is less a road and more of a challenge issued by nature. You wake early, too early, and dress in the quiet. Fumbling with laces and layers by firelight. The frost has returned for a final performance. Crisping the windows, stiffening the door, and politely suggesting that your idea of spring was premature. But you go anyway, because today is market day. And that means possibilities. It means trade. It means, dare you dream it, cheese. You gather your goods. A bundle of dried herbs. Some strips of mended cloth. 2 spoons, carved with loving frustration. And 1 small jar of pickled turnip that you hope no one asks questions about. The children are still asleep. The pig is not. She watches you from her blanket nest with eyes that say, "Good luck out there, peasant." You step outside and immediately regret it. The path is glass, not metaphorically. It is frozen mud polished by countless cartwheels into a surface smoother than logic. You skate your way forward. Knees locked, arms outstretched, dignity abandoned. By the time you reach the main road, your ankles are personally offended. The market sits 2 villages over. Not far in summer, quite far now. You pass other travelers on the way, faces hidden behind scarves. Greetings muffled, boots crusted with frost. One man pulls a sled with nothing on it but a single large jug. He nods solemnly. You nod back. In winter, that's a whole conversation. The landscape stretches out gray and stubborn. Trees bare. Fields asleep. The sky like old linen, colorless but familiar. Every footstep makes that faint crunch snap sound, like biting into a frozen pear. Somewhere in the hedgerow, a bird sings 1 note, realizes its mistake, and falls silent. By the time you reach the market, your toes are merely ideas. But you're here, and it's glorious. Booths with steaming cups of something almost tea. Sellers bundled like root vegetables. Goods displayed proudly. Smoked fish. Carved trinkets. Bolts of cloth dyed just barely blue. There's music, too. A man with a fiddle that squeaks and wails but somehow charms the children into dancing anyway. You walk slowly, savoring the sensation of being somewhere that isn't your house. At one booth, you trade your cloth strips for a sack of oats. At another, the spoons fetch a wedge of crumbly cheese that you smell 4 times before daring to nibble. It's strong. It's perfect. Historians still argue whether peasant markets were hubs of cultural exchange or just slightly warmer chaos zones. You think both, and something more. They were hope incarnate, packed into baskets and folded in wool. A woman offers you a sprig of dried lavender for your dreams. You trade the pickled turnip. She doesn't flinch. You consider that a success. You linger longer than you should. But the sun is dipping, and home isn't getting closer on its own. The walk back is harder. The wind has picked up. chasing itself across the open fields, looking for cloaks to bite through. Your legs ache, your fingers go stiff around the oat sack. The cheese is now nestled inside your tunic, close to your heart and your stomach. You reach home as the last light fades, greeted by a cheerfully confused pig and the warm burst of firelight through the shutters. The children ask, "Did you get anything good?" You answer by slicing the cheese. A reverent silence follows. Then chaos. Dinner is oats. Beautiful, glorious oats. Thick and nutty and comforting, with a whisper of lavender drifting in from where the sprig now hangs over the hearth. Everyone eats too much. Everyone falls asleep too fast. You lie in bed with tired legs, cold cheeks, and a belly that feels, miraculously, full. Outside, the wind keeps running, but inside, you rest. You've survived another market day. The day begins with envy. Not yours, for once, but the pig's. Because you've just put on your best fur-lined cloak, and she's watching like you've committed a personal betrayal. You tell her it's nothing fancy. She grunts in disbelief. And to be fair, it is fancy. For a peasant, it's brown. It smells like wet hay and boiled onions. But it's fur, which in your world might as well be velvet dipped in gold. The fur came from an old fox, traded from a traveler who needed firewood more than fashion. You stitched it yourself, every seam a tiny rebellion against the cold. You wear it sparingly. Today, it feels justified, because today's wind is serious. It cuts sideways through your walls and puffs the chimney like it's trying to steal your soup. You stand in the doorway, cloak wrapped tight, daring the air to mess with you. It does, mercilessly. You step out anyway, because there's work to do. And you'd like to do it without becoming a human icicle. Out in the village, others are wrapped in their own versions of wealth. Old sheepskin, patchwork furs, cloaks so threadbare they look like spiderwebs with ambition. One man has wrapped himself in what might be a curtain. It flaps regally. Children run by in boots that seem more patch than leather. Laughter trailing behind them in puffs of white breath. They're playing Catch the Goose, which involves no actual goose but plenty of slipping. You wave to your neighbor, who's bundled so tightly you're not sure who it is. They wave back. It doesn't matter. Inside again, you strip the cloak like it's armor after battle. The fire greets you like an old friend with a hot drink and gossip. You settle in with your tasks, patching gloves, checking the seal on your last jar of preserved beans, and whispering threats at the draft that keeps sneaking through the west wall. You pause for tea. Well, tea. It's more hot water with a pine needle and confidence. The children are drawing again, making portraits of the family where everyone has heroic cloaks and heroic eyebrows. You are honored. The pig is portrayed as a dragon. You don't question it. One child asks why fur is warm. You explain, in simple terms, that fur traps air, that air holds heat, and that evolution is unfairly cozy to animals. They blink. One suggests sewing a squirrel coat. You recommend not catching squirrels. Historians still argue whether peasant clothing was functional or symbolic. You know it was both. Every patch tells a story. Every fur, a lucky windfall or a hard-won prize. By midday, the wind grows louder. You can hear it through the thatch, like an angry flute, but you're warm. The cloak is draped over the bench. The fire is fed. The soup simmers. You let your thoughts drift. Back to that fur trade. The traveler had been quiet, wore strange boots, spoke of snow that fell sideways for days and animals taller than a man. You'd assumed he was exaggerating. But now, wrapped in his former cloak, you wonder if he was just homesick. There's comfort in things that last. And this fur, scratched and faded as it is, feels like more than warmth. It feels like memory. Dinner is lentils and flatbread. The children complain and eat it anyway. The pig stares longingly at the cloak. You move it higher. As night falls, the wind begins to fade. Just a little. Enough that the walls stop creaking quite so dramatically. You settle in, wrapped now in a blanket that feels far less luxurious than fur but more familiar. The pig curls at your feet. You close your eyes and dream of foxes. You're holding wool like it's gold. Because in a way, it is. Not shiny or rare or able to be traded for a goat. Perhaps, but in winter, wool is survival. And today, you're helping card it, spin it, and maybe, just maybe, turn it into something that keeps someone else's feet from freezing off. You sit near the fire, surrounded by tufts of the stuff, soft, cloud-like, and slightly offensive to the nose. The pig tries to eat one. You sigh. She retreats, offended that you don't understand her palate. The spinning wheel creaks beside you. It's old, older than you, probably older than anyone in the village. It makes a sound like a sleepy bird every time you turn it, which is both soothing and vaguely judgmental. You spin anyway. Your fingers are slow at first, clumsy in the cold, but the rhythm returns. Pull, twist, guide, pull, twist, guide. You hum a little tune you don't remember learning, the kind that feels built into the bones. Someone nearby coughs. Someone else sneezes. Winter is still here, but so is the wool. You're not spinning for fashion. You're spinning because someone's tunic has holes, because the baby needs socks, because the blanket by the door has grown more whole than thread. You remember when your grandmother did this. She had stories for each ball of yarn. One was from the sheep that tried to bite the priest. Another, from a lamb born on a day so cold the ink froze at the scribe's desk. You carry those stories now. Historians still argue whether wool production was communal or divided by households. You shrug. In your life, it's both. Everyone spins. Everyone knits. Everyone finds a way to keep the wind out and the heat in. By midday, your back aches. The wool pile has shrunk, but your patience is wearing thin. You take a break, stepping outside for fresh air and a reminder that no matter how tedious spinning feels, it's better than trying to plow a half-frozen field. The sun is out, barely. The snow glows with a blue tint, like old porcelain. You see tracks near the barn. Rabbit, probably, or very coordinated chicken. You return inside. The fire has grown lazy. You poke it with the determination of someone who will be warm, even if it means threatening logs with a stick. Your eldest comes in with a tangled mess of wool. You stare at it. It stares back. Eventually, you win. Dinner tonight is simple, boiled grain, with a hint of something savory you can't quite place. Possibly the memory of onions. Possibly just wishful thinking. Afterward, you sit and knit. Badly. Your rows are uneven. Your loops. Suspicious. But the sock grows. Slowly. Like a strange woolly mushroom. The children applaud your efforts. You remind them that socks are gifts, not insults. The pig sneezes. Everyone laughs. You finish one sock. Just one. You hold it up triumphantly. The children argue over who it fits. Turns out, no one, but it will warm a potato nicely. And that's not nothing. The night creeps in. You hang the finished yarn from a hook above the fire, watching it sway slightly as if dancing to some silent tune. The room is quiet, peaceful, safe. You settle under your blanket, satisfied. Your hands ache, but your heart? A little warmer. You're not sure if it's morning or just slightly less night. The fire has gone out. Again, you hadn't meant to fall asleep so deeply. But the day before had been long, full of wool, wind, and soup that took 3 hours to convince the beans to soften. You lie still for a moment, tucked beneath a quilt stitched from at least 5 different lives, one patch floral, one striped, one suspiciously burlap. Each square remembers a different winter, each one still warm. You listen. No wind, no clatter of shutters, just the faint sound of water dripping from the eaves. The thaw is here, not the dramatic, snow melting in sheets kind, but the quieter version, patches of mud instead of white, a little green moss beneath the trees. Your boots stay wet now, not frozen. The air smells like wet earth and secrets. You light the fire again. It resists, then catches with a satisfied woof. You hold your hands over it, absorbing warmth like a sponge left in the sun. Outside, the village feels like it's exhaling. People walk more slowly. Doors are left open a sliver longer. A child somewhere is trying to make a sled work on mud. It's not going well. You take your tools to the garden. It's not planting time, not yet, but you can prod at the dirt. Pretend you're doing something useful. The soil is dark, half frozen, and stubborn, but it gives a little. Just enough to feel like a promise. You find last year's potato skins, now entirely philosophical in nature. A broken comb, a spoon. You briefly wonder if the garden has ambitions of becoming a thrift shop. There's something comforting about digging. Something repetitive, grounding. 1 foot in the earth, 1 thought in the clouds. You take a break and watch your breath. It's still visible, but fading. Each puff a little fainter than the last. Like winter itself is losing interest. Lunch is dried peas and regret. You spice it with crushed bay leaves and the hope that no one notices it tastes like bark. The children run outside and immediately return covered in mud. One says they saw a worm. You cheer like it's a royal sighting. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants marked the arrival of spring with rituals or just collapsed in relief. You suspect it was both. The ritual was the relief. In the afternoon, you walk with your neighbor to check the beehives. Yes, bees. You'd forgotten about them. They're still tucked away, huddled and humming inside their straw homes. You lean close, ear to hive, listening for the low, sleepy buzz that means they're still alive. They are. You smile. Your neighbor says they'll wake soon. That there'll be honey again. You both try not to cry at the thought. On the way back, you find a crocus. A single one. Purple. Unapologetic. Bursting through the snow like a flag of rebellion. You kneel beside it. Whisper something silly. A thank you. Maybe. Or a promise. That night, the house feels warmer without explanation. Maybe it's the extra bodies pressed close. Maybe it's the thicker soup. Maybe it's just that crocus. Still blooming somewhere under moonlight. You sit in silence after everyone's asleep. Watch the shadows move. Feel your heartbeat slow. It's still winter. But you can smell the ending. And that's enough. It starts with a knock. Not the kind of knock you expect in a quiet medieval village. Not the urgent kind, bandits. Fire. Missing goat. No. This one is hesitant. Polite. The knock of someone unfamiliar with your door. And maybe even with knocking in general. You blink yourself awake from your spot by the hearth. The fire's burned low, but there's still a warm orange glow clinging to the stones. The children haven't stirred. The pig remains thoroughly unconscious. Her leg twitching in a dream involving turnips. Probably. You open the door, and there stands a traveler. Cloaked in brown, eyes weary, beard carrying at least a week of secrets. He holds a walking stick carved with little notches, each one a mile. Maybe, or a memory. His boots are crusted in 5 kinds of mud and at least 2 regrets. You nod. He nods back. In peasant terms, that's a full introduction. You invite him in with a gesture. He steps across the threshold like it's sacred. He doesn't speak much, just offers a small pouch and thanks. You open it later. It contains dried apricots and a tiny, carved button shaped like a duck. You don't ask. You simply nod again. You offer soup. It's thin, but hot. He eats it like it's a feast. And you can't help but feel a little proud of your parsley placement. As the fire warms his hands, you notice the way he looks around, not judging, but remembering. Every object seems to mean something to him. The crooked stool, the patched cloak, even the ladle. You wonder if he's been here before. Long ago. As someone smaller. Someone younger. Maybe he's a runaway son. A lost cousin. Or just someone chasing warmth. Like the rest of us. Historians still argue whether medieval hospitality was born of generosity or necessity. You think it doesn't matter. In winter, warmth is shared. It's the rule. The only rule that matters. After the meal, the traveler helps stack more wood by the fire. He hums a tune that makes the pig snort in approval. The children sleep on, unaware of the brief guest in their small world. Before dawn, he's gone. Left no note, no sound, no farewell. Just his empty bowl by the hearth and that duck button now resting beside the fire poker. Catching the first blush of morning light. You make tea, pine and confidence. As always, you think about the knock. And how rare it is to open a door in the middle of winter, and find something other than cold. And somehow, the day feels different. Not warmer, exactly, but lighter, like a story has been told. And you were lucky enough to be the ending. You sip your tea, the pig sighs deeply, and the wind, for once, forgets to blow. This morning, you wake to birdsong. Not a whole choir, just one bird. A little out of tune. Clearly unsure if spring has actually arrived or if it's been tricked by a slightly warmer breeze. But still, it sings, and that alone is enough to make you smile before your eyes even open. The children are already up, debating whether the ice on the trough counts as real ice or breakable ice. The winner gets to not feed the chickens. This is democracy, peasant style. You stretch slowly, each joint protesting like an old door hinge. Your blanket falls away, and for once, you don't immediately shiver. That, in itself, feels like luxury. The pig, dramatic as always, has relocated to a sunbeam and refuses to move. You consider joining her. But there's work to be done, and not the desperate, frostbitten kind. Today's tasks feel almost ceremonial. Hopeful. You head to the stream with your battered bucket. The water flows freely now, trickling over stones like it's been holding back stories all winter and can finally whisper them again. You kneel, fill the bucket, and wash your face in the icy water, just once. For bravery, you gasp like every generation before you. Back at home, you open the shutters wider than usual. Let the light in, let the dust sparkle in that magical way it does when the sun remembers you exist. You air out the blankets, shake out the cloaks, hang them on the line like banners declaring your continued existence. The wind flaps them about, and for a moment, the whole house looks festive. Lunch is shared outdoors. It's still too cold to be wise, but it's symbolic. Bread, cheese, a few wrinkled apples. The children declare it a picnic. One brings a flower, brown at the edges but proudly held. You place it in a chipped mug and call it centerpiece. Later, you help your neighbor repair a gate that's leaned at a 45-degree angle since November. Every time it creaks, you both laugh and do nothing. Today, though, it gets fixed, with twine, optimism, and one stubborn nail. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had a concept of leisure. You suspect they did. Only their version came disguised as chores done slowly. Or a midday chat over cabbage soup. This counts. In the evening, you sit on the step. The fire crackles inside. The sky turns a bruised lavender. A few more birds chime in. Tentatively, you imagine them checking their calendars, nervously rehearsing their spring songs. The pig finally decides to join you. Sits beside you like an old friend who doesn't need to talk. You lean your shoulder against hers. You remember winters worse than this. You remember winters easier, too. But this one had just enough mud. Just enough firewood, just enough stories, and just enough hope. The stars arrive, one by one. You whisper a thank you to the air. Not to anyone in particular, just to the general idea of having made it. Then you stand, stretch, and step back inside. The house smells like wood smoke, bread, and slightly burnt wool. It smells like home. Tonight, there's a strange hush over the village. Not the tense kind that comes before a storm, but the rare, golden kind that arrives after days of wind and snow and effort. The kind that feels like the world itself is taking a deep breath and holding it. Just for a moment, you notice it first in the way the doors don't creak. How the air inside the house holds its warmth without complaint. How even the pig hasn't made her usual early evening argument about snack rations. You sit by the fire, not because you have chores to finish. Not because someone needs mending or a sock emergency, but simply because you can. Because tonight, you get to rest, not just collapse. You boil a little water. Drop in a sprig of something that might be mint. The flavor is debatable, but the steam is a small luxury. You hold the cup with both hands, like a relic from a more generous world. The children are already asleep. One curled like a cat. One sprawled like a dropped cloak. One has somehow wedged their foot between two floorboards. You consider rescuing it, maybe later. There's a blanket over your shoulders now. Not one you made, but one your grandmother once patched with leftover bits of your mother's wedding dress. The stitches are crooked, stubborn, familiar. You look around the room and take stock of your life. 3 loaves of bread cooling by the window. A jar of preserved cabbage sealed with wax and prayer. A fire that crackles more like a purr than a threat. And one slightly dented ladle that everyone claims wasn't their fault. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants understood happiness as we define it now. Whether their moments of joy were fleeting, or if their standards were simply more grounded. You suspect they knew it well. Quiet joy. Humble joy. The kind that shows up unannounced beside a fire and stays long past curfew. You hear an owl outside. It hoots once, then again, a call and a reply. The sound echoes gently off the snow-soft ground and carries into the forest, where trees keep watch like silent monks. The moon peeks out, round, pale, and smug, as if to say, you made it, and you did, through freezing mornings, cracked hands, blisters, and bean soup, through broken tools and stubborn goats, through endless socks and not nearly enough butter. You made it. Tomorrow, there'll be mud, chickens will escape, someone will spill milk and swear it wasn't them. But not yet. Right now, you sip your strange tea. Listen to the owl. and feel the warmth of everything you've survived settle around you like a story told just for you. The pig shifts in her sleep and snores once. Dramatically. You smile. Then close your eyes. And let the quiet carry you. And now, the fire crackles softly in the background. The embers, glowing like old stars, pulse with a steady rhythm that mirrors your breath, slower now. Softer, as if even your thoughts are wrapped in wool. The walls no longer creak from cold but settle like sleepy shoulders into a familiar blanket of quiet. You're warm, finally, not just in your fingers and toes, but somewhere deeper, beneath the skin, behind the ribs, in the old part of you that remembers how to rest. Outside, the wind has curled up beside the hedgerows. The frost has tiptoed away, and the thaw is whispering lullabies to the roots beneath the earth. Even the pig, your grumpy sentinel, is snoring gently by the hearth, her breath a puff of contentment in the amber light. You've walked long miles, chopped and mended, hoped and waited. You've dreamed with your eyes open and held a crocus in the palm of your hand like a promise. You've survived the coldest nights not by brute force, but by habit, humor, and something as fragile and stubborn as belief. Now, let your thoughts slip gently into silence. Let your mind wander past the fields, beyond the trees, through the mist and into that soft, endless quiet where winter finally sleeps. You're safe, you're home, and it's okay to rest now.